Welcome back. One of the biggest benefits to running this channel when it comes to Kickstarter watches is that I often get to try them out beforehand when doing a review, and this helps me decide firsthand if I want to jump on those Kickstarters. But I don't get to look at everything, and just like you guys, I get introduced to watches all the time through other channels, and every once in a while, I run across a Kickstarter that I jump into, just based on what other reviewers say. In fact, it happened twice last fall. Now, of course, there were some production and shipping delays with everything going on, but eventually, these have found their way to their new home. One of them is the Traska Summiter, and the other is the watch we're going to look at today, which is the Beaufort Aerotimer. And with a name like that, you would expect something more military or a pilot-style watch than what we have here. Beaufort says it's an inspired 1930s era military design, and I can kind of see that here with this chapter ring. Yet they've combined it with some rather vibrant colors and a California dial. And I'd say it's more of a casual sports watch, and maybe leans a little bit into being a dress watch, which is the real reason I jumped on that Kickstarter. Now, I've been looking for a new California dial, and I loved how these looked, but I really loved that it wasn't just another diver. The Aerotimer already has a number of reviews, but most of those are on the prototypes, and as I said, this is the final production version, so there might be some differences between the two, but we won't know until we take a closer look. The Aerotimer sports a moderate-sized case at 40mm without and 43 with the crown. Lug-to-lug is a little bit longer than I was expecting at 48.5. On a casual watch of this size, I would expect just a little bit less. But a lot of this has to do with these long, slender, curved lugs. The Aerotimer is also fairly thin at 11.45mm, and that's all the way from the exhibition case back to the top of the single domed sapphire with AR. So overall, it's a great case shape here, and one that should fit most people just fine. And on a side note, I want to give Beaufort some credit here for listing the specs exactly as they are on their site. Oftentimes they'll be rounded down, or when it comes to thickness, they'll leave out the crystal. Yet here, it's spot on. But let's get back to the case. The finishing and the extra details put into it are beautiful and well thought out, especially when it comes to the lugs and the bezel. The sides and the top of the lugs have a nice smooth brushed finish, while still maintaining a polished beveled edge that runs down and really shows off the subtle curve, which works really nicely with the two-step polished clean bezel. Even looking at the side profile, you can see that the brush section is outlined and highlighted by the polished edges of the bezel and the case back. Now, one unusual choice is the lug width of 22mm. At 40mm, I would have expected a 20. So in some ways, I think it does throw off the proportions a little bit and gives the case shape more of a stubby feel. Yet pushing them further out does seem to accentuate those long lugs and the overall polished outline of the case. It's really a striking design, where the various polished edges always seem to catch and play with the light at every angle. And I think this shows that the case is as important to the design as the dial within. Now at the 3 you do have a signed crown with Beaufort's logo, which at first glance seems rather Celtic, but it's just a propeller sitting on top of a triangle. Overall, it's a good size and good execution. However, I would have preferred it if it was a screw-down crown, although you still have 100 meters of water resistance even without. Now, moving to the back, we have a screwed-in exhibition case back, and this does have a sapphire crystal as an added bonus. But through that crystal, you can glance the Elabore grade SW200 movement, which overall looks nice, but again I would have preferred it if it had a custom rotor. Currently there are 4 different colorways, and they're both available in stainless and rose gold cases. Out of those 4, the white dial is the most conservative, but the rest get pretty flamboyant from there. And this is both a strength and a weakness. Now, while I think mint blue is a great fun summer watch, not everyone's going to be down with pastel. But it's also these vibrant colors that help the Aerotimer stand out, along with the choice of a California dial. The applied indices here look great, with the Roman and Arabic numerals in a dark black font, which stands out boldly against the blue backdrop. The geometric indicators at the 12, 3, 6, and 9 maintain that bold black as an outline,
while then being filled with white lume paint, which also creates a nice crosshair effect, one that draws your eyes to the hands, which have a similar appearance. Generally, California dials have more of a train track chapter ring, but this is more like something I'd expect on a field watch, which does make it an unconventional choice, but one that I think works rather well. A single domed crystal often tends to distort the dial beneath it, and usually I find this distortion to be a negative, but I think this is one example where it really enhances the dial beneath it, as here it tends to magnify those bold black indices and just really enhance the sense of depth. Just like the case, the dial here is well thought out, and everything works together here to create a nice, clean, cohesive design. Well, at least as clean and cohesive as you can get with a Cali dial. Personally, I like them, but I know a lot of people just think the entire concept is bonkers. Although the one exception to that, and I think my biggest complaint here, is in the hands. Just like the indices, they are really fantastic to look at. The bold outline helps them stand out, and they're always easy to read. Yet I think they're far too short. Beaufort took an unconventional approach with the chapter ring, so it's really a shame that the minute and second hand never even venture into it. And by not utilizing all that extra space, it does make the watch seem a little off proportionally. Almost as if it couldn't decide if it was supposed to be a smaller 39 or the 40mm watch it is. Yet as a whole, I still think the watch is great, but this is one thing that I think is holding it back. With regard to the lume, it has blue BGW9 applied to the hands and the primary indices. It's not overly bright, but initially it does look good. Now, for the comparison test, this is a little bit unfair, as I did throw it up against some divers. But as you can see, it does outlast the Vostok and lasts just as long as two other divers, but not quite as long as a Seiko Turtle. Now, when it comes to lume, I'm always a nut and prefer more, but for the type of watch this is pretty good. A casual / dressy watch really isn't supposed to be lit up like a torch. Now, movement-wise, we have the Elabore grade Selitta SW200, which is basically an ETA 2824 clone. It's high beat at 28,800 beats per hour, as well as has hacking and hand winding, along with about a 38-hour power reserve. It's pretty much everything you want, and more importantly, expect in a Swiss movement at this price. Originally, the Aerotimer was supposed to use a standard grade movement, but it got upgraded after it hit a stretch goal, so a little bit of an extra bonus there, and one that should lead to some better accuracy, which for this specific one, I was only gaining 4 seconds a day, so no complaints there. When it comes to the strap, the Aerotimer comes with a pretty nice classic looking one, and I believe it's full grain Italian leather. Normally it comes with one strap, but since I got in on the Kickstarter, they sent me two, a black and a brown one. And I think I like the look of the brown better with this dial. Overall it's nice and thick, but still flexible enough to easily conform to my wrist. Starts out at 22, then quickly tapers down to 20 before getting to a deployant clasp. Now, because of those longer lugs and the 22mm strap, I think the Aerotimer wears a little bit larger than it is. More like a 40.5 or 41mm watch, and actually felt pretty similar to my Explorient. Yet even with that, I still found it pretty comfortable to wear on my 7-inch wrist. The lugs just seem to extend out and down right to the point where my wrist naturally starts to curve, which then allowed the straps to conform to the rest and just hold the Aerotimer perfectly in place. Although along with that larger feel, I think it also looks a bit larger than it is, just has a massive presence. With the way the case always seems to catch the light as well as this blue dial, it's really hard not to notice. Like most Kickstarters, if you got in on the ground floor, you got a pretty good deal. And I think these were like $325 to $350 US. And for that, I think you'd be pretty happy with what you got. However, just like most Kickstarters, that's all said and done now. So now we're at full retail sold directly through their site, which is now 739 Kiwis, which I think is about $480 US, but after shipping that goes up to closer to $5. But even with that, I still think it's a good price, especially with that upgraded movement. Now, when it comes to the design, there's nothing quite like this out there. But if you're looking at nicer casual non-divers, you're going to find things like the Traska Summiter and the Vare automatics.
both of which are around $500 after shipping, and they have the less expensive Miyota 9015. There are also some good-looking Hamiltons out there, but of course those are going to be more. The only thing I found that comes in lower than this is some of the nicer-looking Glycine Combat Classics. And those have the standard grade SW200, and if you're lucky, you can sometimes find those on sale in the low threes. The Aerotimer isn't perfect, and there are personally a few things that I would change. But overall, I think it's a great watch, and one that's an excellent fit for my own style. It's a watch with a big personality and a moderate-sized, very comfortable case, as well as a dial that's always beautiful to look at. Now, of course, let me know what you think about the Aerotimer down below, or if you have any questions about the Traska Summiter for its own upcoming review. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for joining me.